we've got a few more signings to dive into.
This offense continues to evolve as the season goes on.
Welcome into Bucs Insider, presented by Hard Rock Bet Sportsbook. Casey Phillips, Scott Smith, and Brianna Dix. And man, we got a big last stretch of the regular season coming up. Very important games for the Buccaneers, and a lot to get to here. Of course, we know outcome of this last game was not what the Bucs were hoping for, but we got a lot of news, and then we're going to break that down a little bit before going on to the next game. So starting off with just some roster moves, what happened so far this week?
Well, I mean, the bad news is Ian McCollum is the latest Bucs defender to go on injured reserve. He got a hip injury pretty early in that last game. So since you have to miss at least 4 games when you go on IR, he's done for the regular season at the least. They used that open spot to bring back Anthony Walker. You guys remember the linebacker? He actually didn't play in training camp because he was on an NFI list. But the Bucs really liked him in free agency, especially in terms of his coverage abilities, which would be useful for the Bucs defense. So he's back. And then we haven't talked about it because we didn't have a show last week. JPP. Jason Pierre-Paul is back. He's on the practice squad. We don't know for sure if he's going to play in any of these games. I would probably bet that he would at some point be elevated. Maybe even this weekend. We'll see. But I like it. I like it. I mean, to me, it's
there's no
nothing
harm.
to lose.
Yeah, nothing to lose. You might as well see. He's always been a guy that's brought a lot of energy, that's for sure. And so, hey, you know what? These final games, you need a spark. Maybe it's even literally just, like a couple third downs here and there. And if nothing else, even if it's at practice, something else, why not? A guy who knows the defense, knows what it's like to be on a Super Bowl winning team, been around the league a long time.
And he's an energy guy.
He's an energy guy. So, what's not to like is what I would say. So, also, I know we wanted to make sure everybody was aware, if you have not heard, of course, the incredible documentary about the 50-year history of the Buccaneers officially dropped last week on Amazon Prime. So, you definitely want to check it out. It's unbelievable. And it just gives, even if you think you know everything about the Buccaneers, you don't. Because guess what? Scott learned things. And if Scott learned things, I guarantee
we all have something to
you will learn things watching it. And then also, shameless plug, Scott and I are doing a sort of companion podcast with it. I'm a big fan of these where, you watch a TV show, you listen to kind of the behind the scenes about it. I'm a big fan, so we decided to create our own because we wanted to go even more in depth than this 10-hour podcast. We were like, that's not enough. Yeah. It's never enough. So,
and each one also includes you interviewing Trent Cooper, the director.
Yeah.
So there's some insight.
That was a huge part of it for us. Was we wanted to talk about our takeaways with it, but also get into Trent Cooper as the director, and he talks about some really cool things about how it was made and what their motivation was behind a lot of things. So very cool. So make sure you stay tuned for that on the Buccaneers YouTube as well. And we have some of the panels up on YouTube that were from the premiere event we did at Tampa Theater back in September, talking to Tom Brady, Mike Evans, talking to Jimmy Giles, Doug Williams. They're really incredible as well. So,
but be careful, because I have to warn you, it's binge. It's binge worthy.
It is, yeah.
You might end up binging it.
Set aside.
I have the last, I was going to go to bed, and then I got to the game at the vet with the pick six, and I couldn't put it down.
Well, I was watching that one, and it kind of ends with that, and then I'm like, well, I have to watch the Super Bowl part now.
There's no point where you're like, now I can stop.
Right.
You got to set aside some hours. Okay, let's briefly dive into this last game, even though I'm sure everybody would kind of wish to just wipe it away, but we are going to talk about some of the interesting notes from it. And man, even though it was a tough loss, you got Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan back, which is super exciting. First, let's of course talk about the triumphant return of Mike Evans, and boy, it was triumphant. Led the team with 6 catches for 132 yards, his 43rd career 100-yard game. Just amazing to see what he was able to do. So what stood out to you guys about his time?
For me, it was his route running, and I think a lot is made on those back shoulder catches on the fade, the jump ball, the physicality. But the thing that really stood out to me was just he ran a lot of those outbreakers, the corners, and then he used that to set up a route later. I can't remember if it was the 33-yard gain or the 45-yard gain, but he faked the DB like he was going to go to the out on the corner. And then once the DB took the bait, he continued going vertically. And then he's really done that throughout his career, whether it's selling the fade and then going inside on a slant for touchdowns. But, I mean, really throughout his career, he's just been an underrated route runner, in my opinion, and I think you saw the fruits of that on Thursday night.
I think the big takeaway for me is, as you were watching those highlights we were just running on a couple of them, they're just the kind of plays that we didn't have somebody that could make those plays on a regular basis while he was out. Like the deep out, he's such a, his catch rate is so large and he's so sure-handed on plays like that That's an underratedly difficult completion, the deep out,
Yep.
and he's just so good at that. And maybe some of our other guys, while both him and Jalen McMillan and for a time Chris Godwin were out, that wasn't their specialty. Or that jump ball down for 45 yards.
I've always liked it described as what would be a 50-50 ball is not with Mike Evans. And it's more of a 60-40, a 75-25 that he makes it not 50-50. He increases your odds, which I think is really cool. And of course, again, another shameless plug. We had him on the Players Table this week with my show that I host with Will Golston.
You're just absolutely shameless today.
I am.
You have
I
no
have
shame.
no shame today whatsoever. So I wanted to play a clip that just hearing Mike talk about what it was like for him to deal with this injury and come back. So let's take a listen.
What did it feel like to you to run out for that game? It was cool that it was the offense's chance to get introduced, and you and Jalen are back. And what was that like to hear that, to be back in front of the crowd and be this primetime game and the vibes, and how did it feel maybe different even than some other games because of that for you?
Just when I thought the game was taken away from me. I thought my first time having a big time surgery or in a big time injury. I've just had the hamstring injuries in my career, and I didn't know how I would process all that, but actually it was smoother because I had my family, my wife taking care of me, my teammates were uplifting me, and Dr. Dombey and Bobby told me I'd have a chance to play, and that's all I needed to hear. And so when I got out there on Thursday night and I was walking out that tunnel, I knew that moment was coming, but it felt really great, and it was a special time for me that I was able to come out there and contribute.
Just so cool to hear him talk about how emotional it was, and just the fact that we think of it as he's gone through injuries before, but it's so different when I've pulled a hamstring versus I have to go through surgery, and not knowing what that's going to mean for you and coming back and what it's even just like to go through surgery. And just really cool to see the way he talked about it. And there's so many things in the show where you just remember, like, God, he really is such a GOAT. Like the way he talks about football and his teammates and working to get back, and I think it's an amazing thing. So it's on Bucs YouTube right now. Definitely worth a watch to hear Mike talk about coming back as well. All right, we are going to take a quick break. We're going to be back to dive in a little bit more on that last game before we move on to the next one right after this. Welcome back into Bucs Insider. Casey Phillips, Scott Smith, and Bree Dix here. All right, let's look a little bit more back on that game. We were just talking about Mike Evans' return, and it wasn't just him. It was also Jalen McMillan. And then finally, we see what it's like. This whole wide receiver room we've been talking about all year and what it could look like. So what did you notice about how that impacted all the rest of the wide receivers and the offense overall?
It's the dream that was hatched in April when we drafted Emeka Buka in the first round, and everybody said, you have all these receivers already. The idea of putting Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Emeka Buka, and Jalen McMillan on the field together, and we know what happened with various injuries, that we didn't get to see that until week 15, but it completely changed the offense. I know we didn't win the game, but I saw a lot of promise for the rest of this season, and it immediately, our offense started going through those four guys. Those four guys combined to account for 26 of the 32 targets for Baker Mayfield, 16 of his 19 completions, and 254 of his 277 passing yards. And I think we saw a lot of different combinations, but one thing that stood out to me was Chris Godwin played 96% of the snaps. So I think he's kind of like the constant there, that he works in every combination of these guys.
Right. You always need a Chris Godwin Jr.
And does so much in the run game, too.
I think we're going to see that continue to be the case. True with that as well. But just so many different ways that we can, because we don't do a lot of four wide, so there's not a lot of time when they're all four on the field, but any three of those gives you so many options, and it just completely transformed the offense. And, it wasn't a huge offensive output, but I think it is a harbinger of some good things to come.
Yeah, I think that you can only get better at it too as Josh Grizzard gets to work with all of them, as Baker gets the chemistry back with all of them as well and gets used to it. I think it's only going to go up from here. And I know also, defense, there was some struggles in that game for sure, but I was excited about Hassan Reddick and the play that he was able to make. He got the only sack of the game, which I know they wish they could have had a few more on that, but what he had could have been a game-clinching play. And I mean, this is a huge moment. This is the kind of play you were looking for when you brought him in. And it's because this guy, and I thought this was such an interesting stat, he's second in the NFL in strip sacks since 2020.
Wow.
That this is his bread and butter, and in such an important game, an important moment, he came up with it. Wish it could have been followed up with a win and a stop after that, but I thought it was a really exciting thing to see. He's now back from injury for a little bit, and that hopefully this is the type of play we can see him make in these ever important games that we have coming up, and just cool to see that version of Hassan that I know that we've been excited to see this season.
I can't believe we didn't get that ball.
Yeah.
We look at that replay and like, well, surely they
Oh,
got that fumble
creamsicle
recovery.
jerseys,
And then
yeah.
the game would have been over.
It's crazy. I know, it's so sad. So Bree, what kind of stood out to you about some of the aspects of this game?
So I'm going to hit on Chase McLaughlin. He made a 52-yard field goal, and then after Cowboys' Brandon Aubrey missed 2 50-plus tries, Chase is now first in NFL history in success rate from 50 or more yards. What a stud. I feel like not enough is talked about the kicker, obviously, a little bit of an unsung hero, but what a stud.
If you just took his success rate from 50-plus yards, he'd be the best kicker in team history.
It's incredible.
Just from those kicks from that distance.
And how important now, we talked so much about all these new kickoff rules.
Yeah.
How much more important is it to not only have a good kicker, but a kicker that is good from long?
Yeah.
Because basically he can kick from so far, and if you are able to get the touchback, I mean, you hardly have to go anywhere.
That's right.
And so when you get into these situations where you're down 1, 2, or 3 or something last minutes of the game, man, what an incredible offensive weapon he has become for them to know you don't have to go as far. And I think that when we saw how important those last minute wins were, those last minute drives, that can be such a massive difference in your season. And I think it's a really good sign on his part.
We're seeing it over and over and over again. We saw it this weekend. Like the Colts-Seahawks game, it happened twice in the last minute.
Yeah, it's so true. So yeah, really exciting that, again, we talked about having all these other offensive weapons back. We've had that offensive weapon all season long. All right, we are going to take a quick break, and then we are going to move on down the road to this ever so important Carolina Panthers game we have coming up this Sunday. We'll be right back. Welcome back into Bucs Insider. Casey Phillips, Scott Smith, and Bree Dix. Now we have put that last game behind us. It did not exist. It is done. It is gone. And we're moving forward to the first of 2 very important Carolina Panthers matchups. So I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about this running back tandem that they have, Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard. I mean, combined 1,900 yards from scrimmage and 11 touchdowns. It's been really interesting to watch them this season because Hubbard started kind of slow after he had a bit of a lingering injury this year, and he had just 217 yards in his first 4 games. So then Dowdle takes over as a starter, and in 2 games, just without Chuba at all, set the franchise record for scrimmage yards in a 2-game span. With 473. So he had 206 rushing yards against the Dolphins and 183 rushing yards versus the Cowboys.
His former team.
Wow. Yes, which I'm sure there was a little motivation there as well.
Right on that.
So I know that when you look at rush statistics and wins versus losses, it's a little skewed because the whole point is if you're winning, you can probably run the ball a little bit more. But even still, in their 7 wins, they averaged 33.4 rush attempts and 28 pass attempts. In their losses, they averaged 22 rush attempts and 34 pass attempts. If you can make them have to throw the ball, get them out of their run game, it is definitely going to be helpful. And that's what the Saints did. You know, the Saints did a really good job against the run game. That's how they were able to get both of those wins against them. That this last Sunday held Dowdle to 2.9 yards per carry. Chuba only had 3 rushing attempts. So yeah, I think that that's going to be just a huge key to the game is can you force them out of being able to rely on just that 1-2 punch at running back and be able to stop that.
Fortunately, run defense is something we actually do quite well.
We actually have been doing pretty well this year. But then let's say we do that, and then they have to pass the ball. They have a pretty decent weapon out there.
So one of Bryce Young's go-tos has been Teteroa McMillan, who is second to Emeka Egbuka in yards and catches among rookies. And Scott and I, during the incessant number of mock drafts that we did back in April, leading into the draft, one of the things that was really on McMillan was stylistically he was compared to Mike Evans, a little bit more of the yards after catch ability, but he's kind of has that better on stretching out the stride for the slants and goes, but also has that jump ball capability. He's 6'5", I think like 215 pounds. Can kind of win in those 50-50 scenarios and really just has a great feel for coverage, the footwork along the boundary, so he's definitely going to be one of the top priorities for the Bucs defense.
Mike Evans plus Yak.
Yes.
Sounds like a good formula.
A little bit
for
of a
receiver.
dangerous combination.
Yes, yeah, that's very true. And then we've talked a little bit about their offense. What about the Panthers defense?
Yeah, so if you look at their statistics, you might not be overwhelmed. They're basically middle of the pack in just about everything, like total yards, 16th or 17th ranked in like total yards, passing yards, rushing yards allowed, points. And if that doesn't overwhelm you, just think of where they came from. Last year's Panthers defense was historically bad, gave up the most points in a season ever. Of course, the 17th game had a little bit to do with that. But they had a lot of work to do. And they brought in a lot of free agents, like Christian Roseboom and Trevon Moehrig. I'm not sure if it's Moehrig or Mayrig.
Sure.
Tershawn Wharton. They got guys at every level. But I think what's really important is a couple of guys that are back for them.
Yeah.
And Derek Brown, first of all, is an absolute monster in the middle of that defensive front. He actually leads their team with 4.0 sacks, but sacks has never been his big deal. He gets a lot of pressures. He's really hard to run against. And he also is really good at throwing his hands up at just the right time.
I was going to say, he bats so many balls down, which
he has 7 passes defense.
Is insane. And then not great, because I know that is something that Baker has struggled with at times. And so I think that'll be an interesting thing to watch for sure.
Yeah, and then the other guy is J.C. Horn. J.C. Horn, who was a top 10 pick some years back, has always been good when he's been on the field. But through the first 3 or 4 seasons of his career, he couldn't stay on the field. Last year he played, I think, all but one game. And at the end of the season in March, they gave him a big new contract, like $100 million. And that was a bit of a gamble on a player that's missed so much time. But he's played all but one game this season, has 5 interceptions. 5
interceptions is wild.
That's a large number these days.
Yeah.
And he's very, very good. I think those are the 2 key guys to their defense, and hopefully we can avoid them as much as possible.
Yeah, I think that's going to be huge. I mean, we need to be able to run the ball to be able to establish getting the ball down the field to Mike, having a little more time.
Action,
So knowing he's up there in the front, then you have a pretty solid corner. It's
probably want to bounce it outside.
Yeah, I would say that's a good idea. I think that sounds like a good idea. All right, we have one more segment coming up. We're going to get into some fantasy stuff and some other interesting numbers, looking at the playoff perspective now and what it means that the Buccaneers are going to have to do in these final 3 games. So we'll be right back. Welcome back into Bucs Insider. Casey Phillips, Scott Smith, and Bree Dix here. Time for our final segment, where a lot of times we talk fantasy. We know we're getting towards the end of fantasy.
It's the playoffs, baby.
For a lot of people. It's the playoffs, baby. And man, I imagine there's a lot of people who had a Mike Evans on their roster who are like, really?
Held on to
finally,
him.
Held on to them, and either you're in the playoffs and it paid off, or I hope you made the playoffs.
Hopefully your league is smart and you had an IR spot so you could keep him without having your bench be thin.
So tell me just your thoughts on Mike himself, and then now what this means when you do have so many offensive weapons for the Bucs. How many of them on their own are going to do enough to be worth starting?
That's a fair question, but I think Mike Evans is a definite start, unless you have like Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Well, Justin Jefferson's a bad example. He's been having a bad year. But he's almost surely a start if you have him on your team. I don't think that's a question. It's about the other guys. And I think Chris Godwin, I think he's a reasonable flex play. I did that last week on one of my teams. And the reason I say that is because what I said earlier. He played like 96% of the snaps. He's going to be on the field. And eventually he's going to get a big, he only had 4 catches for 20 yards, but he got the touchdown on the 2-point conversion. So it ended up being a pretty decent scoring day for him in fantasy. Jalen McMillan and Emeka Egbuka, I think Emeka's a little bit of a risky play right now, although he was pretty good in this last game. And Jalen, I just don't think you can play him until you see him. Because there's only so many footballs to go around. But they're all viable. They're all going to be drafted next year.
Yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with any of them really if you have them at this point.
But Mike's the must play.
Mike's the must play.
I would play Chris Godwin too.
I think those are both solid picks. All right, now let's talk a little bit about this NFC South race. What do the Bucs have to do, and why do they have to do it?
So obviously we're playing the Panthers in 16 and 18. If either team sweeps that, they're obviously going to win the division. Okay, so that would be great. That would be perfect.
Yes.
Where the Bucs have an advantage over the Panthers is they can actually win the division by winning any 2 of their last games. And what that means is if we split with the Panthers, if we beat Miami, we're still going to make the playoffs on a tiebreaker against the Panthers, even if the Panthers beat Seattle in Week 17 as well. And the reason there is common games. So the tiebreakers within a division go head-to-head, which would be a split, record in division games, which would be 3-3 each. And the next one is common games, and there's 12 common games. And if it happens like I just said, split with Carolina, both teams win in Week 17, there's 12 common games, and the Bucs would have one more win, 7-6 in those games. And the difference is the Arizona Cardinals game.
Wow.
They lost to Arizona in Week 2, and we beat them a couple weeks back, and that's what is tilting the balance, the scales in our favor. So thank you to the Arizona Cardinals. But it's just
amazing.
It's a little bit comforting. Like if the Panthers lose if the Bucs beat the Panthers this week, they know that if the Bucs also then beat Miami, they're done. Whereas if the Bucs lose to Carolina, we know that we can still win the division by winning our last 2 games.
Yeah, so you're still very much the whole in control of your destiny, as everybody likes to talk about.
So.
And it's not even meaning you have to win all three. That a lot of times you could still say like, oh, we're in control, but oh, we got to win all three. And look, do we want to win all three? Yes. Would that be a great way to go into the playoffs, feeling really good about yourself? Yes, that is what they're going to try to do. But as Bucs fans, it is really nice to hear about multiple options. And God, I love the way that the league schedules this. They make it where all these little division games at the end, they know what they're doing to make everything very important at the end. All right, that is going to do it for us on this edition of Bucs Insider. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And of course, we'll be back here next week. And we hope you guys are having a fun Christmas week leading in. We hope you enjoy the game this weekend, and we'll see you then.